it's Tox from CritTappin.com. Thanks for watching and welcome back. Today I've got another Kickstarter preview for a game called Stones of Fate. Now this is interesting because Stones of Fate is actually available today through thegamecrafter.com. We'll put some links below in the video description so you can check it out at your leisure. But Stones of Fate is designed by Luke Laurie and it's brought to you by Cosmic Wombat Games. Cosmic Wombat Games. Easily one of the most fun names of a company I've ever said publicly and out loud. It's just a lot of fun to say. Stones of Fate, as you can see by what's out in front of me, is primarily a card-driven game. Each player is going to be given 5 power stones, and you can play from 2 to 4 players. The object is you're going to be placing your stones out into this main area of 9 cards, which is called the spread. Then, depending on when cards are flipped and what happens from flip abilities, and what zones constitute each edge of the card when flipped, will determine who wins those cards. Each card is going to have a point value, and the object is to win the most points worth of cards by the time that the main play deck runs out. Now there's only 78 cards in the entire game, but you're not going to use all 78 in any game, whether it's a 2, a 3, or a 4 player game, which gives you a lot of option for replayability, which is really nice, I thought. It is a very fast, a very fun, and a very memory-intensive game, as you'll see when we show you the setup and we show you the gameplay. But for now, come with me. Let's jump into this Tarot-styled area control game and check out Stones of Fate. So here we see the setup for a 3-player game of Stones of Fate. Now, to begin with, there's 78 total cards in the game. However, you're not going to use all 78 at the very beginning of any game. What you're going to do is set up a play deck made up of a certain number of cards based on the number of players that are in the game. So in this case, we have 3 players. We have 33 of the 78 cards in this deck, including the 9 that are out here to begin the game in what's called the spread. The rest are all placed off to the side and not used in the game. In a 2-player game, there's 22 cards, and in a 4-player game, there are 41 cards. Now, this game is fun with 2, 3, or 4 players. However, we have found it best to be played with 3 players. It is an area control or territory control style game. You'll notice that there are channels up and down and side to side for each of the 9 cards. In addition, the outside is also areas of each of the sides of the cards. Now, each player is going to get this player reference card, and you'll notice that what it says is that on your turn you're allowed 2 actions, and they can be from any of the following. You can peek at one of the cards in the spread or at the top card of the deck. Now, peeking means that you take the card and you and only you look at it. Now, in this case, I see that this is a card worth 3 points, and it's called the Empress. There are no abilities on the card, but it will be worth 3 points to whoever wins it. And there are different zones around the left and right side and the top, but no zone at the bottom. What do those zones mean? Well, we'll get into that in just one quick second. The point of Stones of Fate, though, is that when this deck runs out, you want to have the most points. Some cards are worth positive points, some cards are worth negative points. And if they're worth negative points, you obviously don't want to have them, and you really prefer to have your opponents to have them. So peeking means only I look at that card. So I would take it, I would look at it, and I would put it back, ensuring no one else sees it. Now, you have to remember that the last action you'll see, and we'll jump ahead a little bit here, the last action is flip a card. Flipping a card means that you flip it face up in play where everyone can see it. Now remember, when I peek at this, I see that there's 2 green circles on the left side of the card and 1 green circle on the right side of the card. You don't want to make the mistake when you put it down thinking now that that 1 is here and the 2 is here. They are. But when you flip it, the 2 is going to be here and the 1 is going to be here. So you want to be able to remember that. Now, apart from peeking at a card either in the spread or the top card, or flipping a card in the spread, you can also place or move one of your Stones of Fate. So if after peeking at this card, I decided that I wanted to take one of my stones and put it at the top here of this zone, I can do that. The challenge becomes I don't know what this card is and I don't know what the bottom zone of that card is, so it's a little bit of a gamble. But that's part of the fun of Stones of Fate, is that you're going to learn about the spread throughout the course of the gameplay. Now, when I choose to move a stone, I can only move my own. I can't move an opponent's stone. So if I know for a fact that my opponent has his stone in a very good position, it's not capable of me just moving that around. I have to affect the card somehow to change what's going to happen with that layout. Now let's talk for a second about the zones. There's 4 different types of zones. The first one is a power zone. And the power zone is a yellow infinity symbol. And some cards are going to have 1, some cards are going to have none, some will have multiples around each side of them. I mean, and not multiples meaning multiple infinity power zones on each side, but multiple power zones possible on the 4 areas of the card. Now, in the power zones, you're going to want to count up all the stones in those zones, and the winner is the player with the largest number. So if a card had power zones on the top and the right, whoever has the most stones in both areas combined is going to be the winner. The keystone zones are the green circles, and as we saw before here, the Empress has 2 on one side and 1 on the other. The winner is the player with the stones exactly matching these zones. So if I only had 1 red here, I wouldn't win because I would need another red on that side to be able to win. The forbidden zone is the red no symbol, and players that have stones in that zone cannot win that card. You'll notice throughout the gameplay and the description here, the 2 words stone and zone come up a lot. So if I sound like Dr. Seuss, I do apologize. There's no way I could do him justice. Then finally you have the opportunity zone, which we saw on our Empress. The opportunity zone here has a triangle and 2 lines on each side. And each player that has a stone in that zone is going to be able to draw a card and then add it to their collection. And by that, you would draw the top card of the deck and place that into your win pile, which could potentially add benefits to you or could take benefits away from you. So, let's play through a little bit of a 3-player game and show you how this would roll out. So first, let's presume that the green player is going to go first and that they did choose to peek at this card. And they see it's the Empress and they have the opportunity zone and the keystones on each side. So to win this card, I'm going to need 1 stone on this side and 2 stones on that side. So I'm going to flip this back over, and then as my second action, I'm going to take a green stone for my player and put it on top, making sure I have a stone in the opportunity zone. Now that's the end of my turn. If there were any empty spaces from cards being won or moved, I would then replace them with cards from this deck. But since there's not, it would move to the next player. So the red player would go and start to think, okay, well, this player looked at that and that made some type of advantage to them. Or maybe it didn't and maybe they're bluffing. I'm going to go ahead and see what this card is because they're attached to this one. They don't know what it is, but I, as the red player, am now going to peek at this and look. And this is the Queen of Swords. She, you'll notice, is worth 3 points and has an ability that says when you flip this card, give one of your cards to another player. Now, again, peeking is not flipping. Flipping is actually flipping it over and choosing to score it. To win this card, I'm going to need 1 stone on the top, on the right, and on the bottom. And I know now that the green player has 1 on the bottom. But remember, you have to have the exact number. In addition, the flip ability could be very beneficial if I'm caught with a negative card. I could give one of my opponents that negative card. However, I don't necessarily want that yet. However, we're still at least 3 stones away from winning that card. So I'm going to go ahead and place one of my stones down here as well. Now, I don't know what this is, but my opponent doesn't know what that is. So now the yellow player is going to go, and the yellow player is kind of intrigued. But the yellow player is also going to possibly say, you know what, you guys are fighting it out down here, go right ahead. I'm going to see what's over here, or over here, or over here. Maybe they want to move completely away. So the yellow player is going to go ahead and peek at this card. And they're going to see quite an interesting one. This is the 10 of Cups. This is worth 2 points if won. There is a power zone on the top and the bottom, and a no zone on the left and on the right. So, if I were to have a stone here or here, I could not win this card. Now, peeking at it and putting it back, I know that if I put a stone here, I'm going to be in the lead to win that card, because power zones, you add up the total number of stones. However, I don't know what this card is yet. So a safe play, if I wanted to be conservative, would be to use my second action to place a stone at the top of that card. What that's going to allow me to do is know that once again, I'm in the lead because there's a power symbol at the top, and you're going to add up all the stones in all the power zones. But I don't have to worry about putting myself at risk if there's something bad on the top of that card. Then play would come back to the green player. Now the green player has to remember that this is the Empress. The green player has to remember that the top is the opportunity zone, and that when flipped, there's going to be 1 stone needed on this side and 2 stones needed on that side. So I'm going to remember that, and I'm going to put 2 of my stones right here. I would then pass play over to the red player, and the red player would then go. The red player, if you remember, knows what is needed from the knight right here, that we need to have 3 different stones on each side. However, they still don't know what this is, and they see that the green player is making a pretty big push on this one. So they could either peek at that card and try to get into the fight on this, or they could say, I'm already attached to this card, let's see what's here, since I know I'm going to have to put a stone here sooner or later. So they could peek at this. Now, this is the 8 of Wands, and it has a count of 2, or a value of 2 for if you win it. There's 3 different power symbols around it, or power zones around it, but there's nothing here. So while I need to have a stone here to win this card, I am not going to get any benefit from this side putting it there when flipped. So I would put that back down, again having been the red player that only looks at it. And I could choose, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put 1 right here, which would put me in the lead for that card. Now, play is going to continue along and along. Let's say the yellow player now says, I know that I'm winning that card right now. And I know that nobody else is going to have a chance to win this card if I flip it this turn. So, 2 things that I want to do. The first is I want to peek at the top card of this deck, because that is what's going to replace this card when we win it in a second. So I would notice that if this is replacing it, this is going to have, this is the tower that has 2 points worth of value when won, and only a power zone at the top and a nose or a forbidden zone around the rest of the zones. So that's my peek, that's my 1 action. Then as my second action, I'm going to go ahead and flip this. Now everyone sees it. We add up all of the stones in the power zones, and I have 1, everyone else has none. There's no one with stones in the forbidden zones, so the yellow player would win that and take that card. They would then take their stone back, and they have 2 points to basically winning the game right now. The next card comes out face down. Because I peeked at it, I know what it is, but no one else knows what it is, and that's a nice advantage for the yellow player. They're already leading the game, and they're already knowing what that card is that replaced that one that we just won. Now, in addition to some of the gameplay you've seen, there are going to be cards that allow you to do special things. For example, the Fool has the ability that says when you win this card, each player must remove all fate stones from the spread. Which means if I won this card the way it is right now, with the red player having the only stone around any of the power zones, then each player has to remove all of their fate stones from the spread. So they have to immediately take them back. That would be very painful and very opportunely timed. In addition, there are some cards, like the Queen of Cups, that says when you flip this card, give 1 of your cards to another player. Again, with some cards being worth negative points, that can be very helpful to flip her, even if you know you're not going to win her or no one's going to win her, and then be able to give 1 of your opponents a negative card. That's some of the deeper strategy inside of Stones of Fate. Sometimes you're not playing to win a card. Sometimes you're peeking at cards and then flipping them immediately just to get their ability to trigger. And what that means is if you do that, let's say for example this card was actually the Queen of Cups. Let's say on my turn I peeked at it and then I saw that it says when you flip, give one of your cards to another player. And let's say I had a negative card. My second action for the turn, I could flip it over. If there's no stones in the keystones here, no one's going to win it. And whenever a card is not won, or whenever a card is tied for, so let's say like this, the Fool was flipped and we had each player had 1 point there. Whenever something is tied for or not won, it is placed in a discard pile and it will be replaced with the next card from the top of the deck. So that makes it even more interesting because not only is it a game of memory and a game of strategy, it's a game of tactics of, well, do I want to leave this card on the board and potentially let somebody else peek at it and flip it and gain its ability? Or now that I know what it is, do I want to use my second ability to go ahead and flip and pull that out? It's also kind of fun if you really want to get crazy. You can be very random and just say, you know what, I haven't peeked at this card, I'm flipping it. Just to get rid of it if you know what the next card coming out is. There's a lot of different strategies that you can apply inside of Stones of Fate. So that's Stones of Fate. The one word that comes to mind when I think Stones of Fate now, after having played it, is surprising. When we first got this game and actually first looked at this game, it looked very light. It looked too light. The fact that it was only 78 cards, I was a little worried about it. I thought once you knew those cards, it might be something where you just play to gain one card over and over again and it becomes a game that just doesn't find its way to the table. However, I can tell you I've never been happier to be wrong. First, let's look at the components. These are not the final Kickstarter components. These are just the GameCrafter.com components. But they're very good. The GameCrafter.com always does a great job. The artwork on the cards I have found to be gorgeous, but it's good to note that some of them have a little bit of partial nudity, so it may not be something you whip out with the younger kids all the time. It's always good to know, not again trying to parent, but just always good information to know. Now that said, they're very tarot-like, they're very artistic, they're very colorful. In fact, sometimes I wish almost that the cards were tarot size just because of that artwork, but obviously larger cards, higher costs, more cost to us, yada yada yada. So overall, artwork wise, very 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 good. I've really enjoyed it. It is a mixed bag though. Some people like it, some people don't. In our play groups we found some people that loved it, we found some people that just didn't care for it at all. So it's really a matter of taste. But you've seen some of the images that we've shown you here in this video, and of course you'll see some on their Kickstarter program, which we'll have links to as well here in the video and down below in the video description, so you can take some time to check it out on your own and see if that's something that appeals to you as well. Gameplay wise, this is where the surprising really comes in. There are a lot of tactical decisions and a lot of strategic decisions. Way more than I would have ever thought. Because of the actions that you get on your turn, peeking, moving stones, flipping cards, you're going to learn information as the game goes. It's a very progressive game that way. Like for right now, these were 9 new cards. I'd have no idea what they are. I'd have to slowly peek at cards, learn information, gain information from where my opponents are placing stones, and there's a bit of bluffing and a bit of gambling going on in that. And that makes it very, very engaging and very fun. But there are times where you're going to have to make a decision. Do I want to leave a card in play that I know what it is if I'm not going to win it and perhaps someone else is going to win it? Or do I want to take a card that I just looked at that has a great flip ability that I'm going to flip right now and use it and possibly give up a lot of points that I could have won had I left it on a board, but the flip ability could give me a big advantage. There's a lot of different tactical choices you're going to have to make and a lot of strategic timing of when you're going to have to make them. And I really found that to be really enjoyable. Even though there's only 78 cards, the way that the game setup works with making the play deck with a certain number of cards based on the number of players really makes a big difference for each of the games from game to game to game. Surprisingly, I'll use that word a lot, surprisingly this has found its way to our table a lot more than I would have thought, and for multiple games in a row. A 2-player game can be played in as quick as 15 to 20 minutes. A 3- and 4-player game takes about 30 to 40 minutes. So even if you wanted to play multiple sessions in a night, easily done. If you wanted to use it as a filler in between larger games over the course of an evening, easily done. Because it's only the 78 cards, it's highly portable. I mean, you could put it into like a Deck Pro box, take it with you in a backpack or a purse or something like that, and you're good to go. So there's a lot of enjoyment that you're going to get out of it from that perspective. Now, the other thing is engagement. When you deal with a game like this, there's a management of the information on the board that you know, and then there's a management of the information that your opponents know. Let me give you an example. If this is the beginning of the game and I peek at this card and only I know what this is, and I place it down and then I place a stone next to it, you know one of two things. Either that zone is valuable to me and I'm placing a stone there to gain an advantage, or I'm bluffing and it's not valuable. But you don't know that unless you take the opportunity to peek at it. There's a lot of different things that are going to happen, because what's going to happen next is my opponent could then either peek at this card to know what it is and understand if I'm bluffing or if I'm not, or they could start to make their own way into the board from another area and start to do the same type of thing. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have information about certain cards, my opponents are going to have information about certain cards, and I have to start to remember, what cards do we both know? What cards do I know? What cards do they know? On top of all that, what's the information I have? It seems like a lot. It is a lot. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of memory and a lot of remembering going on in this game. But once you're familiar with the 4 zones and how they work, it becomes very easy to start remembering, okay, it's beneficial for me to have a stone here, it's not beneficial for me to have a stone here, or I need to have more stones here. Basically, those are the choices that you're faced with. But because of all the differences of the cards that are going to be face down in the spread, with flip abilities or win abilities when you gain the card, there's just going to be so many different strategic options that you're always engaged in this game, even for as fast as it's going, to know what the other players are doing. We found that both surprising and very enjoyable. So that's Stones of Fate. Let us know what you think. If you've got Stones of Fate already from thegamecrafter.com, feel free to leave your comments and let us know what you think. If this is the first time you've seen it, definitely feel free to ask us questions or let us know any comments below here on the YouTube channel. Of course, you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Google Plus by searching Crits Happen, and you can find us at our homepage at critshappen.com. But until we see you next time, we hope that you enjoyed this critical preview of Stones of Fate, and if it's something that interests you, you take a second to check out their Kickstarter project, which is going on right now. Thanks so much for watching. Until we see you next time, keep rolling those dice, and we hope they're all crits.